Hello artists, it's Kelly Folsom here, and I want to welcome you back into my studio for another Vital Art session. This week we have a very simple sunflower scene to paint. One of my favorite things about summertime, of course, is sunflowers. It always reminds me of Italy and the fields of sunflowers. And this time we have several other sunflower paintings, painting lessons in the video library archive, so make sure that you check those out if you really want to learn even more about sunflowers. This time we're keeping it really simple with just 2 sunflowers. So I've got this paired with some beautiful copper, and I've chosen a complementary color of blue-green that will set off both the yellow. It ties together with the yellow because blue-green has yellow in it, and it is the complementary opposite color to the red-orange that is in the copper. So you can't go wrong with this color combination or this value combination. And I'm hoping today to be able to show you how to simplify your approach and actually have a more successful approach when it comes to painting sunflowers by following the steps that I take. Some of those steps are a little bit counterintuitive. It may actually feel like the wrong thing to do, but it's what ends up making a beautiful, layered, painterly sunflower. So let's dive in and get started. Okay, let's do this, artists. Let's do it. We have this beautiful, simple arrangement. Keep it simple, sweetie, of sunflowers and copper with a blue-green background. All right, this arrangement just goes to show that you don't need something super complicated, some super complicated composition to have a beautiful, successful painting. So I'm going to start with some burnt umber, and this time instead of ultramarine blue, I'm using my Prussian blue, which is my green-based blue. Okay, and a little bit of that goes a long way. I just want to get this toned with a lot of the medium here just to kill the white. First you tone, then you get your size and placement. Then you paint your background. Then you paint your darks and your lights in the foreground. Okay? Or color and light, however you want to word that. But that is a good protocol no matter what you're painting. No matter if it's high key, low key, whatever the case may be. Tone, size and placement, background, lights. All right, so that should be good enough. Since this is a light against dark painting and a lower key painting, I can go a little bit darker on this tone and be okay. But when you're toning, just definitely pick something that is kind of neutral. And usually on the warm side, not too cold, not too saturated, because anything that goes on top of this will be affected by this. So you don't want to ever tone with anything too strong of a color. Now we want to get our size and placement. And one of the things that I always like to do is find out where are the thirds on my canvas. Okay, because 9 times out of 10 we think we have more room than what we do. We think we have a lot of room to fill, and we make our objects too big and fill out the entire canvas. So this just kind of helps me know where these objects are going to go, and usually it's in this center to right quadrant of those thirds. So I like to just kind of use the envelope shape here, kind of figure out, well, how wide is the space in between these 2 sunflowers. My main sunflower is going to be on this center to right third, And just use simple masses, simple shapes. Don't be afraid to put down lines, brush strokes that won't actually be there. Right now I'm just looking for gestural lines in the painting, and they'll all be covered up with other paint here in a moment. But you want to stay free during this time and broad. So really getting the gesture, really getting the movement with a brush. So the bottom of my copper pot is going to end about at that bottom third. Cast shadow off to the right. Let's put a little more of that Prussian blue. You could also use phthalo. You could use a cool green if you have a cool green. We'll put some of that in there in the cast shadow. And then front of the table edge, I'm going to put some red oxide in there, more burnt umber. As we come down here, this will be my table edge here. So I'll just kind of establish that line. And then, since this tone is wet, I can actually use my paper towel just to kind of wipe away where some of my lights are on this sunflower, especially where it meets the background. Most of the light on the sunflower is on the right-hand side because sunflowers are like a little bowl cupping the light. Hold up a bowl. Have your light coming from left like mine, and hold up a white bowl, or any bowl really, and look at how the light falls on the inside of that bowl. It's totally opposite of what's happening on the copper pot. So anything that's concave, like a plate, a bowl, an open flower like that, the light and shadow pattern is going to reverse. So for example, here, shadow shape is here, curving with the contour, this side of the contour, to create three-dimensional form, and light is on the left side. Okay, I want to get all these shadow shapes in. I'm actually going to deepen that shadow with some ivory black and transparent red oxide. Might as well just go for it, get it the color and value that I want it. Okay, getting all size and placement, getting all these shadows, shadow shapes, darks. Well, I left that out whenever I was doing the intro, didn't I? Sorry. You always do your shadow shapes and your darks first, then background, then light and color. Okay. So this shadow shape just goes up and down with this side of the neck. And this shadow shape curves with the belly of the copper pot. Okay, and cast shadow underneath that line. Now we can do, background, but first I just want to wipe out with my paper towel. This one's in profile, so this will be super easy to paint, or easier anyway. And that's our size and placement. It already looks like a painting, and we haven't even got hardly any paint on there. It's amazing. All right, so for background color, in the dark side, I'm going to do black and some of the Prussian blue and some raw umber, actually, just to get it a little bit lighter. I'm going to put some Merge in there, which is my speed drying medium. I'm going up and down strokes, because this is a perpendicular up and down plane. Much like this is an up and down plane. So it doesn't mean that you won't do any horizontal strokes, but that the majority of them will be up and down strokes. Now, like I said, this is a pretty dark background painting. It's light against dark. So you really want to push that shadow side. It's not too as dark as you can go. It's not totally black, but it's pretty darn dark. And don't worry too much about getting the blue-green color in the dark. You will show us more of the color in the light. So you want to put more color in the light, more detail in the light, because that is what our human eye is built to look for, is detail in the light. So now let's lighten this same mixture and get a little more color to it. Okay, I'm going to add some white. Just immediately take it up quite a few notches in value. Some more of my blue. It's kind of a blue-green, so I'm going to add some Naples yellow light. And sometimes that can just look a little too candy color, or you know, it's kind of a muted blue-green. Now, if you like it super pure, keep it pure. That's up to you. I do recommend, though, that your purest color should be your star of the show sunflower here. So try to make it a little more muted than that. Okay, so just adding more white. I'm pulling in a little bit of this burnt umber to neutralize the blue-green. And I'm really just squeezing out a lot of that paint. The background is really where you can be a little more vigorous with your brush pressure and go faster. You don't have to be quite so specific. Okay, so I do want to get a good amount of that on there. I'm going to go a little bit more darker blue-green from on this side to this side, and just kind of walk it into that shadow mix so that I get a little bit better of a transition. While I'm here, I can go ahead and try to carve out silhouette shapes of the petals a little more clearly. But again, a lot of that's going to happen. A lot of those shapes are going to happen whenever I get the yellow on the brush. So I don't want to get too precise with that, because if I do, the tendency is going to be to not to want to mess that up. There's nothing to mess up yet. But if you get the drawing too perfect at this stage, that is what our human brain tells us. Don't mess that up. You got that just right. It's perfect, you know. Oh my gosh, and there's nothing worse than having something so perfect on your canvas that your brain says, don't mess that up. It's okay. Everybody's brain does that. So it's why you just have to kind of recognize this is what the human brain does, and it's not my fault, but I just have to work with it. Yeah, I just have to basically trick my own brain into doing what I want it to do, right? Okay, carving out where this stem is. And you know, one reason why I chose this background color with this pot is because there's just this gorgeous bits of blue-green on this pot as well. So it's such a beautiful combination. Okay, let's go straight into the copper, really wiping that blue out of my brush. And I'm going to switch down to a smaller brush now. We're going to get some copper color. Cad Yellow Deep, Red Oxide. Yeah, get that color going. Now, most of the pure colors, believe it or not, actually going to be right around the highlight. The rest of this copper, and I would say up here around this highlight, the rest of the copper color is actually going to be not that orange, not that pure. So I'm going to grab some burnt umber, or since I'm out of burnt umber, raw umber, more red oxide. Raw umber is going to take it greener, so if you have burnt umber, grab that. I just don't have time to reload. But basically you're getting a more neutral version of that red-orange. More red oxide, more raw umber. And one thing about metal, copper and brass, and all metal really, is that it's darker on the starting edge, lighter in the center. And most of the metal is a lot darker than what you think it is. It's really the highlight that turns it into lit up, you know, feeling bright and lit up. Now I can start dipping into some of my blue-green here on opposite side of the light before we get to shadow, just to neutralize. Down here as well, the turning plane down here. Anything turning away from the light source, turning back in space, like back here on the back right side, you can use a little bit of that background color. And then the highlight on this, I want to keep, some of it has a little color, but then it's got this tarnish on it. So some of it goes very cool, some of it goes very hot. I'm going to start with hot with the Cad Yellow Deep and white. And then I'm also going to put some cool on there. Your highlights should always go, somewhere towards the center to pull the eye to the center. And then we're going to use some of that blue-green background with white now, too. I'm putting this on with a palette knife because the paint is super, super wet and it would never stick if I tried to use a brush. A little more white and yellow. And then this one up here really goes orangey, so I'm going to use some of that red oxide, Cad Yellow Deep, actually some of my Cad Lemon to get this one a little more fiery. That's the other thing about brass and copper, is that the highlights tend to have more fiery color, less white. And like silver has more white in the highlight generally. Okay. Now let's go to work on those. I want to just get a lighter version of that blue. Might put some raw umber in there. For some of this dusting that's on top, you want to curve your stroke to describe the form. And you could put as little of this or as much of this as you want. It's really just a matter of what you think looks best. Obviously, if you put too much, it won't look like a copper pot anymore. It might look more like a silver or a stone pot, but I do like that this color ties together with the background so beautifully. And so as you can see, I'm just kind of gradating some of that transition just by kind of blending with my brush strokes here a bit. I should say one of our members made an excellent point about the difference between blending and manipulating paint. And I have to agree, there's such a big difference between the two. So the main thing is when you're blending, you're trying to get rid of brush strokes, you're trying to smooth everything out. And meanwhile, you're taking off paint and you are just getting it looking flatter and flatter and slicker and slicker. Manipulating the paint by moving the brush around the canvas, you usually always have paint on the brush. So you're adding paint to the surface and you already have put good paint down, so you're not really taking off a lot of paint. You might be taking off a little bit, but not a lot. And you're really just kind of pushing and pulling paint around to get it to where you want it to go. Okay, so I think that is a beautiful point that one of our members, Debbie Nelson, made, is that point about there's a difference between paint manipulation, and blending. And I would say the two objectives are totally different as well. All right, so now we've got the copper looking like how we want it. We're going to the sunflowers, and those are actually going to go by pretty quickly because we've already got the light and shadow pattern painted in. So the inside is in shadow, so I'm doing basically my copper color on the inside, and I might just darken that just a little bit, touch more in the center. You want to paint that inside first. And then I want to take some of this blue-green and more of the yellow-orange. I'm going to get something a little lighter than that. For the base of these petals, I'm going to keep this edge here a little softer where it meets that oval. So right now I'm kind of tickling that edge with my brush to keep it a little softer and more fused. On Also, you could neutralize with burnt umber as well. But basically all these shadow planes, you want to paint some of this shadow yellow first before you go straight in for that bright yellow. Again, you want to paint whatever's underneath or back behind first, and then paint what's on top or what's in front over it, especially with wet into wet painting. I'm curving my strokes to get the well, just the curve of the petals. Now, all these petals are radiating around that center axis. Okay, now we can go in for some lighter yellows. So I'm just gonna clean my brush with my paper towel, grab my Cad Lemon and my Cad Yellow Deep. And one thing on this is that it's almost better to start with a little more Cad Yellow Deep and then add more and more Cad Lemon as you need to go a little lighter or a little more cooled off. Now you'll notice I'm dragging in some of the background color. It's actually very beneficial to tie into the background. And then once it starts getting maybe too green, I just wipe my brush, get a clean slate again. All of this paint is so buildable. It's just a beautiful buildable technique. Okay. Don't add white to this, or else it will start looking maybe more like a daisy, less like a sunflower. So you do want to keep the paint really rich, really vibrant, saturated in color, and leave yourself some room to go, you know, more brilliant and brighter with the Cad Lemon where needed. So build up to that lightest light. Okay, so we're just slowly building these petals, building the form, starting the stroke on the outside, lifting off on to the interior. Narrower edges, you can turn your brush to the side like that, or you can use the palette knife. Either way, whatever works better for you. And you can really only make one side of the petal at a time. These filberts are really, really great for making sunflower petals. All right, I'm really squinting down because I want to really check and see which petals are really getting more light, which part of the sunflower is getting more light. Because I know how concave forms catch the light, the most amount of light always hits on that inside of the form, opposite the light source. So that's where I'm adding more of my Cad Lemon, thicker strokes, thicker pieces of paint on top, just adding more layers there. So in this way we get all these rich layers that is very indicative of multiple petal layers on a sunflower. It's not paint by number, it's not fill in the lines. It feels more realistic and more like, you know, nature. Now I'm going to pull some of this down here for some of these petals that I like to have a few scattered petals. Plus that helps connect that yellow light to the tabletop as well. There's one over here, but it'll be more in shadow and darker. Now this one we definitely don't want that intense, and there's a lot more shadow color in it, a lot more of the blue-green, so I'm going to dull it down with my shadow color first. And this one will be so much easier to paint too because it's in profile. Things in profile are always easier to paint. It might be kind of harder to get the illusion of depth on them perhaps because there's very little perspective and overlap, but it definitely makes our job a little easier. I'm also hoping that this shows you that, you know, making a beautiful painting doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be difficult. You know, it's not really about what you paint, it's how you paint it. And I really also think it's all about, you know, finding beauty even in the simple simplest of things. Okay. Now we need to get some of those green stems. So I'm going to start with my Prussian blue, my lemon yellow, and that's like, holy moly, that's so green. That's like the most intense green you can get. And then I'm going to soften it a bit with my Naples yellow light, a little bit of yellow ochre too. Now these tend to kind of flatten out like a little, almost like a little teacup saucer, like the sunflower is the teacup, and these are like the little saucer underneath that, you know, kind of flattens out a little bit more. Now don't forget to go a little bit darker. I'm going to do some black and cad yellow deep here at the base. This is like the crevice where, you know, the crack where the petals and the green leaves connect, and there's very little light that can get in there. So you definitely want to push that to be a darker accent. I'm seeing now that there's a couple overlapping tips on the left side that need a little bit more light. Got a little flyaway petal back there, which I think is kind of fun. Okay, finally, the last, well, first we need to get, we need a few lighter greens. So I'm adding some cad lemon and white. Especially here in front, you want to really accentuate anything that's overlapping in front of another form, like that's overlapping in front of the copper. You want to really accentuate that more than anything else on that form. Just to create more of the illusion of depth. And then of course we have this stem over here. You can see how much more neutral that is. So I'm going to use the orange, red orange here on my palette just to neutralize that color because they're complementary colors. These are the ones that need to be a little more intense. And then that deeper green, I'm going to do some raw umber and cad yellow deep. That'll make a really neutral, shadowy, earthy green for the shadow shape down here on this one. It'll also function as a lit shape against the background up here too. It's really amazing how that works. One value, one color in one place looks like a dark, and in another place it looks like a light because of what's around it. So last but not least, what you're going to want to do is just manipulate the edges a bit more by remixing up your background color. That's why it's so important not to finish out your background color too early, because you actually do need it to manipulate more of the contours and more of the edges. So in other words, like remixing up some of this dark of the background, and I'm going to take my brush and kind of carve out any clearer shapes. You know, you can only get a shape so clear by adding a brush stroke. You can get it even more clearer and cleaner of a shape and sharper of an edge where needed by carving back into it with the paint. Same thing on this side. You know, if I just want to get a little more specific petal shape, I can just carve into that, or like one of these green stems, I can just carve in with the background color to refine that shape a little bit more. And you can also use it to just soften effects. So I can actually paint right into this if I want to kind of soften and make that more mysterious by bringing the value closer together and also softening the edge. So again, try not to fine tune your background color too quickly. And then I might want to actually put in some more yellow around this lit side. So remixing that up, this time adding maybe a little yellow for a little more glow. And even dragging a little bit of that yellow from the petals while I'm carving them. Will help get glow too. And then I just kind of mix it in and blend it in to the background. Some of this background color would also be nice just to reflect into the shadow side, especially the back edge of that copper pot. Okay, everybody, I hope that this has been helpful to you. And as always, I wish you happy painting. Please share your results in our Facebook community. Ask any follow-up questions, share any follow-up thoughts. What did you think about this lesson? What insights did you get out of it? What new things did you discover? You know, I know a lot of times we're repeating the same things, but you know, you never know when that one thing is just going to hit you that day so clearly. So if you've had any ahas in this lesson, please share in our private Facebook group. And until the next lesson, I wish you happy painting. Bye.